Okay. Hello, everybody, to Frosty Goes to Town, Session 1. Four Pines is very excited to bring this program to all you little peeps because it is going to be a learning experience, if you want it to be. Every month, I hope to teach you something a little new. You can either decide to do it or say, no, I like my current way, and off I go. What we're going to be teaching here in house is the digitized version of Frosty Goes to Town. And we've broken it up to, I think it's a 7-month program. You can just buy the packet and do applique the old-fashioned way. But what we're doing in here is we've actually digitized the designs in 1 month. I'm going to show you how that was done. We actually are cutting out the material using an electronic cutting machine. In-house, we have a scan and cut or a Cricut. You can use one of the others, either machine. You can even use a Silhouette if that's what you have at home. So if you buy into the program, you will not only get the digitized files, but you will also get the SVG files. I recommend it, however, for a 9x14 hoop. Originally, we started the program thinking we could do 8x12. It was 7 or 8 hoopings. These blocks are large. I didn't think that was a lot of fun. So if you're going to join the digitizing party, I recommend a 9x14 hoop minimum. Otherwise, you can do the packet the old-fashioned way, the old-fashioned embroidery way, which we will talk about as we go along. So, shall we get started? I am proudly showing off our block 1 of Frosty Goes to Town. I need to back up, I guess, so you can see the glory of it. Now, what we've decided to do here at FPQ, Four Pines Quilting in Claremont, New Hampshire, is do some background quilting before we actually do our applique. Because I didn't want to have to deal with how to custom background quilt this after I did my applique. What you're seeing in the sample is a design called Winter that was available if you bought the Kimberbell's Blue Tiles starter kits. So it is exclusive to that starter kit. I am in love with their designs and how easy they are to use, and that's why I chose it. If you have blue tiles, you have this design on your stick. And that's what we're going to use in here to demonstrate, because lucky us, we all have blue tiles. So again, Winter Swirl in your Kimberbell collection of tiles. In your kit is a big piece of gray fabric. And the first thing your instructions are going to tell you, which should be included with your files. If they aren't, you need to holler, because we did write a PDF up for this. And the first thing you're going to do is prep your fabric. Anybody who knows me knows that I like crisp fabric. You don't have to go to the extra mileage of using Terrell if you don't want to. I just use Best Press in the example. So starch or starch alternative, but I want you to treat your fabric. We're going to be doing a lot of embroidery on it. The next thing I suggest you do is get hold of some of the Kimberbell Project batting. Now, it doesn't have to be Kimberbell Project batting, but I'll tell you what, for what we're doing, it's perfect. It's nice and thin, and yet it holds stitches really well. Because when we're done, we're going to put another big piece of batting in this quilt. So I just wanted something to give myself a little structure and a little texture, but not overwhelm the weight of the quilt when we were done. So this is a piece of Kimberbell batting that has been fused using a temporary adhesive spray to the back of my gray fabric. You'll notice that the gray fabric, I don't know if the blue lines are being picked up on this, hopefully they are. In your instructions, it tells you very clearly to mark the horizontal center and the horizontal vertical. And after you get those marks, I then want you to figure out where the top is. And I want you to mark the top. Because trust me, if you don't mark the top now, you start to get confused. Because these are rectangles. They're not squares. So it does matter where your top is. The next thing I want you to do is mark 10 5/8 to the left of the center vertical line and 10 5/8 to the right of the center vertical line. I don't know if you can see it, but she's marked way over here, 10 5/8 to the left and the right. The other thing I want you to do is go up 8 3/4 and down 8 3/4. What this ends up giving you is 4 rectangles plus a full outside box. Magically, that outside box should measure 21 1/4 by 17 1/2. And I want you to double check it, because if it doesn't, the rest of your month is going to go down the toilet. The other thing I want you to check is the individual size of each quadrant. They need to measure 10 5/8 by 8 3/4. If they do not, your next steps will not be fun. And I can tell you, I've seen people get the outside right and the inside wrong. So check it, double check it before you go on to the next step. Okay. We are now ready to begin our quilting. I prefer to use the magnetic hoop during this stage just because I find it's funner and easier. You can use your regular hoop, that's fine. When you get to the next stage, when we're actually doing the applique designs, I do not want you to use the magnetic hoop. You will be going in and out of the machine many times, and as much as I like magnetic hoops, movement can and usually does occur when you move them in and out of your machine. So let's not do it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the machine and load it up. Another tip that I want to give everybody is to always hold the back, because I saw this happen, hold the back of your, whatchamacallit. I don't know what they officially call this. It's where your hoop slides into your arm. Hold it when you put your magnetic frame in so that this does not accidentally go forward. Likewise, when you go to take your hoop out of your machine, I want you to put your thumb in front of it so that it doesn't pull forward. If this gets out of kilter in the middle of your run, you will notice things out of line. The only way to fix that, my friends, well, not the only way, the best way to fix that is to shut off your machine, restart it, and your arm will automatically recalibrate. So if you hear a funny, don't keep going, shut down, start back up. If you put it in and you go, it doesn't line up right, I didn't see it move, doesn't mean it didn't. So don't keep going. There's ways to fix things, but we don't want to fix them if we don't have to. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is come over here, and I'm going into my embroidery setting. This is a Brother Dream machine I'm demoing with today. We're going to go to my stick. You'll notice I have a Frosty Goes to Town folder. Inside of Frosty Goes to Town, I have block 1. And as life goes on, I will have a block 2, a block 3, a block 4. That's how I organize stuff. If you follow this way of organization, that when you have a question and you call, we all are on the same page and we can answer your question quite easily. So if you'd like to follow this organization, feel free. In block 1, you'll see I have 4 hoopings, right? Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put our embroidery design that we've chosen from Kimberbell, load it up into your machine, and I'm going to show you one of the beauties of Kimberbell's designs that, frankly, they're not tooting their horn enough about. Makes me like them even more. Notice I'm not using a single blue tile, but I am using a blue tile design. So I'm coming over to my stick now, Frosty Goes to Town, block 1. And you'll notice I have loaded in a Kimberbell 8x10 design. That is a standard size for Kimberbell. I chose the 8x10 design. Why? Because my quadrants are 8 3/4 by 10 5/8. But I don't want to use, the first sample I did, I figured out what blue tile needed to go where. And then I had an aha moment. Wait a minute. Kimberbell's stuff is designed so well that I can just take their file and make it fit my quadrant and then save it, and month after month after month I have the file. Now keep in mind, I own this because I bought blue tiles. If you did not buy blue tiles, you will not have this design. It is exclusive to that. I hope I convinced you it's worth it because it's a beautiful design. But you can use any design, but I'll warn you, if you try to use like an end-to-end design on this, it is not going to work. You cannot do what I'm about to do. This is unique to the way Kimberbell has created their tile system. So let's go in and choose it and bring it up on the machine. And you'll see the file size isn't really 8 by 10. They round it off. There's actually a registration mark that's included in that size. So that's what you see there. But that's the design I want, so I'm going to set it. Setting it now, I know it's too small. I told you it was too small, remember? So now I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to do a resize on it. When I resize it, my first option that I like is to resize it proportionally, height and width at the same time. As I'm doing this, I'm watching the sizes up here on the screen. Can you see these numbers? Watch how they change when I push the button. See how it's 10 by 8 now? Perfectly adjusted. Everything still looks great. I'm going for it. I'm going further. Oh, now it's 8 and something, 10 and something. I can go a little bit bigger if I want. I am. Ooh, that's pretty good. Now remember, I told you 8 3/4, so I'm not even at 8 1/2 yet, by 10 5/8. So I can go even a tad bigger. Now I don't want to go too big. I don't want to get too greedy because I like to give myself some wiggle room. I don't want my quilting stitches to touch one another when I'm done. And I don't want them outside my blue lines. The blue lines are going to tell me where my finished size is. When we're done, we'll be trimming the batting out of those seam allowances. I don't want my quilting in my seam allowances. It is strictly a beautiful background. That's what it's for. So I don't want to go as big as my quadrant is because now I have no wiggle room. I'm actually pretty happy with this. That gives me approximately a 1/4 inch to maneuver around. Do what you want, but don't go bigger. You won't be happy. So I'm going to say, this is beautiful. I love it. I'm going to say, okay. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it because I don't want to recreate the wheel. I want to do this, use this stitch out 4 times this month, and again and again and again. So I'm going to hit memory. When I hit memory, I can choose to either save it on my machine or on my USB stick or both. I'm going to save it on my machine because it's there all the time. So here I go. But you could also go back and save it on your stick. And now it's in both places. Handy. All right, everybody with me so far? All right, so on my machine, I have the design loaded. I've resized it. I've saved it in memory. I've saved it on the stick. The next thing I'm going to do, because I have a Brother Dream machine and can do it, is I'm going to actually scan to find my blue lines where this is going to be positioned. I'm not happy with my quilt. Oh, wait, the other thing you should do is make sure none of your fabric is underneath your hoop. Guess what happens if your fabric is underneath your hoop? It gets stitched to itself, and then you've got to take your stuff out. So take the moment and double check that all your fabric is nice and tidy. All right, so let's go ahead and hit the scanner up here. The button might be different on your baby lock or on your luminaire, but the concept will be the same. It is now scanning, looking for, I should have done a better job of that. Hopefully it's going to give me blue lines that I can then use for alignment. Well, that was much faster. I was complaining about the speed of my scan before, and silly me, under settings, you have a standard setting and a fine setting. Very often, standard is all you really need, and it's literally half the time. I went into my settings and changed it back to standard, and I'm like, oh, that was much faster. So, my fault. Okay, so now what I see on my machine is I see my design, and I don't know if you folks can pick it up on camera, but I also see my blue lines. And my job now is to go into edit mode, and I don't use the move button, I use the rotate button because I can rotate and change location at the same time. So I just recommend rotate over. Even if you're not going to rotate it, it's just easier in case you have to. What I'm seeing is that it's coming out, looks pretty good on my, over here on my margin down there. It doesn't look too bad on the bottom either. I might be able to tuck it this to the left just a tad, so that's what I'm going to do. But boy, did Becky hoop straight or what? Doesn't usually happen. I usually have to rotate and move. But what I'm seeing is really nice, actually. And so I'm just fiddling and diddling to my heart's content. And then I say, yeah, I like that. I'm good to go. But there's one other thing I like to do. Now I think I'm happy, right? So I'm going to say, okay. But I also, and come out of edit mode, when I go into embroidery mode, I don't know how many of you know, on the Luminaire, it's called this layout screen. On the Dream Machine, you have 2 edits. Under this second edit, you have the ability to base around your design. Now, I'm not going to do it in this case. It's held down quite well. But a lot of people forget that's there. And that's really helpful if you're doing designs that are in the middle of a larger hoop and you need to base it around. That's where it's at. The other thing I like to do is I actually like to trace where I'm headed. If I go into this button down here, did I do that too fast? Button down here. I can actually say, where is the upper right hand quadrant? And look it is telling me, I can even turn on my laser button. And the laser isn't always 100% accurate, but that will tell me where that first quadrant is up there. Now remember, that's not your quilting stitching, okay? It is the total outside frame of everything. I'll show you how to, but see how I can walk? This doesn't matter so much on the first one, but it does matter on the second and third and fourth. Basically, looks pretty good. I mean, remember, we need to have some wiggle room in this. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. But I use that to double check before I push the go button. The other thing I like to do is take in my needle position here and go to the first layer of stitch. Now see, I look at that and I go, oh, it is a little high. And now that I'm looking at my screen, I say, oh, my snowflake is a little bit out of my blue border. See, I can fix it now though, right? So I can either decide I want a smaller design and give myself even more wiggle room, or I can move my design down. I'm going to actually opt for sizing it down because I kind of liked the space everywhere else. So I'm going to say okay to here. I'm going to do a return. And I want to go back to size. And remember, I had it at 10 5/8. I'm going to bring it in smaller. I like that. That gives me just a little bit more wiggle room. I want more wiggle room. So I'm going to say okay, and guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to save it so I know this is the one I really want. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is go to rotate. And now I have the ability, if I wanted to, I'm pulling it down from the top because that top first stitch is a little too tall for me. I want a little bit more wiggle room on my seam line. Okay, I'm getting it now. I like it. Let's go. Now, do y'all remember how I tested my stitching? We went into embroidery and I did a walk. I'm telling you, a lot of people forget this is here. I'm going to turn on my laser light. Look at that. I like it. I like it. See how I gave myself just a little bit more wiggle room? But the effects are going to be beautiful. So I do this all the time. And the beauty is, I loaded that design in once from Kimberbell. And see how now I know this is where I want it away from the seam allowance. I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to say okay. And then I said, let's check the first stitch. So I checked that. I'm like, okay, yeah. I don't know if you can see on the camera now that I have more room around the outside edges than I had before. Yes? No? Good. Okay, so I've loaded my bobbin. Here goes! I just love this design. And we don't need to watch the whole thing stitch out because this is what you're going to do. And guess what? After you do it once, you're going to do it twice, you're going to do it 3 times, you're going to do it 4 times, and then you're going to have a beautifully stitched background like this. And once you get your background all stitched up, we'll switch hoops because we're not going to use the magnetic hoop for the next stop. We'll be using our regular 9x14 hoop, and we'll start showing you how fun it is to get this thing appliqued. Yahoo! Look at this! Number 1 done! done! So exciting! So basically you're going to do the same thing 3 more times. You're going to take it out of the hoop. You're going to line up your next quadrant, stitch it out, line up your next quadrant, stitch it out, line up your next quadrant and stitch it out. And before you know it, you'll have your background quilted and ready to go on to the next step. Yeah. Okay, so now we're ready to do our first hooping. In your instructions, there's actually a list of what will happen in your first hooping. It says it right here, and they're all block 1, H1 means hoop 1. Hoop 2, hoop 3, hoop 4. You have to do these in order. On your stick, I will show you that you have block hoop 1, hoop 2, hoop 3, hoop 4. Do those in order. It's important. And the reason it's important is our design has layered appliques on it. For example, we're going to put the snowbank down first. And then on top of the snowbank is a fence. And on top of the snowbank is a tree. And if you build your house, you'll see that you've got the house and then the doors and the windows and the awnings. And it's got to go in order or yours is not going to look right. The other thing is that nobody out there has a hoop this big. So that's why we have to do it in 4 hoopings. And the first thing you're going to be faced with is that snowbank. Because that snowbank is bigger than your first hooping. I'm going to make your life easy. We're going to show you how we start the snowbank. And then basically the process is going to be the same for the rest of hoop 1. Okay? What I recommend, not required by any means, but the stabilizer I liked for this project was a Kimberbell product called Wash Away Sticky Back. So it's like the sticky backs where you hoop it with the shiny side up, and then we're going to remove the shiny side and we're going to have sticky, but it washes away. I didn't want to pull my stabilizer out behind my product, especially with batting on it. That's why I chose a wash away. It is pricey, but we don't need to use it for the whole project. We just need to use it for our embroidery blocks. If you don't want to go that route, another option is to use one of the mesh products and leave it in your leave it in. Don't tear it out. There's also a fusible mesh that you can iron your product, your fabric down to and help it stay. But that product is going to stay in your finished piece. You're not going to remove it. It's not a removable. And it does make your final result a little bit stiffer. But that is an option and it costs less money, so that may be an option for you. Now, once I have it hooped up, shiny side up, I'm going to score it. I'm just using a regular pin. Probably most of you know how to do this already if you're doing Frosty. But you just score around. I score down the middle just for ease of removal. Whoops, whoops. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you know. And then I'm going to pick up the edges and tear it away. And what I'm left with is a sticky substance that one didn't tear away the line. A sticky substance that I'm going to be able to stick my background to. But not yet, because how do I know where to put my background? What we're going to do is we're going to call up our design off of our stick again. You'll get to see that it's the Frosty Goes to Town, block 1, inside block 1, hoop 1. Get it? Block 1, hoop 1. And when you bring that up, you're going to see a design that includes everything we're going to do in hoop 1. We're going to do the first half of the snowbank, we're going to do the trunk of the tree, and we're going to do the little cup with a snowman in it. And that's all we're going to do because that's all that will fit. So when we put our hoop in, the very first thing it's going to stitch, when you put your hoop in right, is a placement line. And again, your instructions are going to tell you about this. And so I'm stitching the first placement line before I put my fabric down. So I'm going to set this design in place. And just to show you what it is going to do, I'm going to go straight into embroidery mode. And I like to use the plus or minus keys because that shows me on the screen what it's going to stitch. Ready? Now what I've loaded in is a color that I can see when I go to the placement stitches. Once you get used to doing that, you can use the color of the first thing you're going to stitch and you'll be fine. In this case, it was white for my snowbank, and you wouldn't have seen it on camera. So I switched to blue for the placement lines. So, well, let's get ready. That's what we want to stitch first. So here we go. It is going to stitch a placement line that represents the left hand corner of my panel. What it's stitching out, and this is why you'll find top to be important, because I just told you it's stitching out the first of the snowbank and then the cup and the saucer. So I need to be working in this quadrant. Hoop 1 is this quadrant, okay? So when I take this off the machine, which we will, you know what, I like, it won't let me. I like to move my hoop to get it out. I don't know if you guys know that trick. Taking it off when it's ready for the next step and it's way up there is a pain in the butt-insky. So I just came out of it for a minute so I can easily remove my hoop. Remember, thumb in the front. This is important not to get your registrations messed up. Now, we're going to go to this overhead and I'm going to show you how I line it up. You can use a wool mat. I don't have a wool mat up here today, so I'm going to use the June Taylor squishy pad, which really works good for this, by the way. And when we turn it over and it's time to press, guess what? I got a little pressing mat. So it'll work great for today. When I put this on here, I can see my blue line. Is that showing up on film? I'm going to do it. Can you guys see it? Yeah? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up on here. I'm not trying to line it up with the quilt square. I'm just trying to line it up so I can poke holes. I'm going to turn it this way. We still okay, Ed? Yep. I'm going to find that lower quadrant on my little guy. And guess what? It should be easy because, oh, here it is. I labeled it top. So now somebody labeled it top. I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to put it in this corner right here. And on my mat, I'm going to match it to the corner of the line we just printed out. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, okay. And these pins are just temporary. Don't go and stick the whole stabilizer down at this point. Oh, actually, a tip for our fellow Frosty is you can take your ruler and lay it across your hoop while you're putting your pins in, and this keeps the sticky from sticking when you don't want it to stick, because it tends to stick, because that's what we paid for. So that's just a little safety net that I can see where I'm working. Okay, it just didn't have to be exact, guys, because guess what? We got a scanner. But if you don't have a scanner, then you want to be very careful with this. So in it goes. All I am is connecting dots. And now I feel very good about that. I'm pressing it down because I don't want it to move. And now I'm going to come over here, remove my ruler because I don't need him anymore. And basically one more pin is going to go here. And I am matching it up, just so you know. I'm just looking at that line I stitched. So I'm matching up the lines I drew with the lines I stitched. And by using pins, it allows me to get closer than just peeking. Oh, that's good. All right. Then I'm going to say, you are good to go. I'm going to take my... Don't leave your pins in. The machine does not like them. Or your ruler on your machine. Okay. Now, if you refer to your notes, it's going to tell you the next thing is going to do, and that is to stitch a placement line for our left half of the snowbank. So what I'm going to do is quickly change our thread to white, because we don't want a blue. Now, a hint. These are blanket stitches, not satin stitches. So I highly recommend you use the same color thread for your placement stitch as you do your final blanket stitch, because it helps build up that edge. In fact, in some cases, I ran the blanket stitch more than once because I liked the look of the built-up blanket stitch. That's just a preference. You can do whatever you want. But don't put black thread in for a placement line, because you go, oh, it's easier to see, because you'll see it in the background of that blanket stitch and you won't be happy. So be certain to use the same color. And let's get this loaded. And we're going to do our placement stitch for our snowbank, and I'm going to show you how we put that snowbank on, and then basically you're going to continue to step through this whole thing step by step. Placement stitch, attach, placement stitch, attach, until you are done with hoop 1. So we won't show the whole thing, we'll just show it getting started. Okay, so in we go. We've got white loaded because I know, and how do I know? I'm going back into embroidery mode. Remember I went out because I took my hoop off. Plus or minus, I've already done the placement stitch. Advance. Okay, that really. I hope it isn't. Oh, I know why. It's because I'm so close to the edge. That's all. Okay.
I know that.
All right. So my screen is telling me it's doing a placement stitch for the snowbank, and so do your instructions. If you look at the instructions, it says, hey, guess what, guys? The next thing is your snowbank. So we're ready to go, I think. Let me push this down for you. Ready? So we've loaded our hoop in. I've advanced to the snowbank so that we can do the snowbank. I'm also looking at the bed of my machine and seeing that the snowbank is pretty well aligned with where I want it to go. Now, if you have the scanner, you can actually scan and place your whole design on here. So let's just show you how to do that. I have to come back out. Let's go ahead and do a scan. Block 1, the scan feature isn't that critical, but I'll tell you, it's just another safety net. Like we used it for the background quilting, I like to use it for this stuff too. Especially for the snowbank, because it's going to have to get joined precisely. Alright. Okay, so now if we look, of course you can't hardly see the snowbank, but I can, and it is downright perfect. I don't know why or how. Oh wait, I do, because we stitched placement lines, guys, and we took it over here and we used our pins and we took our sticky back stabilizer and we used that to mark it. And guess what? It looks fabulous. Woo-hoo-hoo. Like it when a plan works. So now I'm going to go back to my stitching because I don't need my placement line. Now, if I did stitch my placement line again, it wouldn't be the end of the world, folks. It would just be in my seam allowance. But, you know. And make sure our fabric isn't underneath. We're going to get caught. A trick for this is, I don't know if you know those little clips. I love to use those little happy clips on my, I don't have one today, on my frames. If you put those little clips, they're just paper clips, but I call them happy clips because I bought colored ones with smiley faces on them. And they're magic as far as I'm concerned. You can clip this up here like this and you won't constantly be worrying about, oh my gosh, is my fabric getting caught up? It really makes a difference. Okay, ready, set, go. This is not the tack down of this snowbank. It is a placement stitch. Look, do y'all see how wonderful that is? Y'all see how accurate that is? I love it when it goes together right. Now the process we're going to do next, you're simply going to repeat over and over and over again. Once it's finished with its placement stitch, we're going to get our fabric and we're going to put it down. There is no tack down stitch in this. It is a blanket stitch. So I'm going to go over to the overhead just so and I'm going to go this way too, so I don't forget. I'm not moving it this time, in case that's what caused that funny thing. Thumb in front, guys. Thumb in front. Okay. Now, if you see top down, it was kind of hard to see, but it really is. It's right along here. It is showing me where to put my snowbank. So I'm going to grab a snowbank. I have a snowbank somewhere. Oh, that's true. You'll notice when you get your pieces, see how big the snowbank is? That it has Wonder Under already on it. Some of you know how easy it is to get rid of Wonder Under. Some of you, like me, don't. The trick is to not do it till it's sat around for a day. Not really a whole day, but it feels like it to me. And then to take a pin and just score it, just like we did the stabilizer, frankly. And once you do that, it just magically peels off. So easy. I wish I'd known that years ago. All right, now, we're not going to stick the whole thing down, guys, because we're not stitching the whole thing yet. And truthfully, stuff shrinks and moves a tad every time we do something on the machine. So I only want you to stick down what we're going to sew down. And guess what? I told you where that was. That's the placement line right there. And when you stick it down, I want you to pretend that it's right on that placement line. That placement line is exactly where the blanket stitch is going to go. Exactly. So if you end up getting over it, guess what's going to happen? Your blanket stitch is going to be somewhere in here and it's going to be ugly. If you end up too far under it, your blanket stitch is going to be up here and not catch your fabric. So you really want to take the time. It's finicky, but it's worth it to register it on the net. I am a lover of these little Cricut irons, but any iron will do. 300 degrees is as high as I would go. Flannel, this is a cotton flannel and it can get scorched. So don't be on a cotton setting and holding it down for 20 minutes. It's literally seconds that we're putting this on. So I'll do this front corner and be really happy with it. And once I'm happy with it, I'm going to move down. This isn't, oh, I didn't even hear it. It's on there. I guess the flannel's thicker. I guess I need a little bit more attention. This is finicky, but well worth it. Now on the other pieces that aren't flannel, you'll see they iron down much faster. Right now my heat has to go through the flannel, which has also got an interface on it because flannel's wonky and stretches and shreds. So your kit also came with an interface with a Pellon product 101 and then the Wonder Under applied on top of it. So when you have the flannel, you do have to give it just a little bit more time and attention. But the trick is you want to get it on those placement lines. Now, I'm going to give you a tip. This is going to become your seam allowance. So if for some reason you have to make a judgment call on to which side of the snowbank is the most important, I picked the top. The other hint is there's a big house that's going to sit in the middle of this. So what we've done is we've divided the snowbank where the fence and the house are going to cover where those two blanket stitches have to meet up. Why? If you're not exact, it will never show. It'll be hidden. Back to the machine we go for a stitch out. Again, finger back here. I can't say that enough. I'll stop saying it now, though. Again, if I had my little clips, which silly me for not having them, I dig that up. Now the next stitch, according to your instructions, is going to be the blanket stitch, which I just love watching. So let's go it. I still got my white in. Remember, we used the placement and the blanket of the same color thread. And off it's going to go. Again, where this ends, we're just going to let this flop till we get to hoop 2. When we get to hoop 2, we'll be dealing with this half. Don't press it down, just it'll be fine. You just let it roll. This is the point where sometimes I have to go around another time just because I like a heavier blanket stitch. But you'll see on the screen now, and according to your instructions as well, the next thing it's going to be the little cup handle. And again, this is my cup handle is red. So I would change my thread to red before I did the cup handle. But I would do it the exact same way I just did the snowbank. All through hooping 1. Watch your instructions in order, switch your colors as you go, take it out, iron it down, put it back in, And I'll see you after you're done with hoop 1. Okay, well, I hope you had fun doing that hooping number 1, which was this quadrant right here. This was hooping number 1. Well, guess what? It goes on, it's pretty much the same thing. So I'm just going to walk you through the hooping of number 2, which will be down here, hooping number 3, and then hooping number 4. The process is the same. You're going to hoop that stabilizer, you're going to put it on your sewing machine or embroidery machine. It's going to do a placement line, and I'm going to describe the placements line to you today. Then you're going to go back and you're just going to put your pieces in one at a time and keep things rolling. So let's go look at take a look at block 2, and I'm going to use my computer to show that to you. I mean hoop 2. Jeez. So block 1 is the one we just completed, and that's what you see on my screen right now. By the way, this is in Brilliant software, and the free version of Embrilliance allows us to watch stitch outs live, which is why I say, hey, you should at least get that version. But we're going to go ahead and look at hooping number 2. This is what we hope to accomplish in hooping number 2. You're going to see that we're going to finish the snowbank right here. We're going to put on the entire fence. We're going to put on the easel and the wording on the easel. That wording by the easel came with your little fabric accessory pack. I recommend pulling the plastic off that whole sheet, put a piece of one under on the bottom of that sheet, and then cut out your pieces. It's a lot easier than putting one to under on itty bitty little pieces. So we'll be using the first part for our fabric sheet here, and we'll do the windows, the doors, the awning, and the big part of the house. And again, just like in step 1, I say, use the placement thread color the same as your final blanket stitch to get that nice build-up. You are going to be changing threads. The snowbank will be in white, the fence in a different color, or white if you choose. But whatever you do for placement, that should be your blanket stitch. Let's take a look at what this is going to stitch out like. On Embrilliance, way up at the top here, you see this little needle? That allows us to watch a stitch simulation. And we can either just put it on automatic mode and spin it through, or what I'm going to do is go on my own pace by using this little arrow key right here, this little wedgie tool, and watch what happens as I pull it through. Because my mouse is stuck on something. Piece of thread. Sorry, guys. I'm going to go ahead and pull it through. Now you're seeing what's going to happen first, which is the stitch out. See how it's doing a line down the... This represents the corner of that next quadrant. But watch what else it does. It zips up and does this funny little line. This little line right here, that represents the snowbank you already put on. So we got a little registration mark that we can line up our current, remember the first half of the snowbank? And I've got registration lines that show me the left, the right, and bottom corner. Let's take a look at it on the sample. What I'm seeing is a registration line that represents the snowbank I already have on, and then the line you drew on your panel that went down here and along here. What's really critical, guys, is that this snowbank lines up here. If for some reason, due to shrinkage or whatnot, you're a little bit off in the end, be off on the end, not in the middle. You need these snowbank lines to line up exactly right, or you're going to end up with a pleat. The good news is the pleat will be hidden underneath the house and under the fence, but it will exist if you don't follow those registration marks. So this again is stitched out on the sticky back stabilizer before you put your fabric down, and then you use the same pin method that I showed you in hooping 1 to line those marks up. After you've got them lined up, it's going to go on and it's going to stitch the placement line for the second half of the snowbank. Let's back that. See how that snowbank stitches. Now the snowbank, again, was left flopping in the breeze. Now is the time to iron it down. Now's the time to stick it down and continue to let the blanket stitch out. So in your case, you probably have white in, but you wouldn't see that on the screen, so that's why I made it blue. After the snowbank, you're going to see it do a placement line for the fence. Again, notice the placement line is all along the fence. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to go grab your fence, iron it on, and watch it blanket stitch all the way around your fence. And after it does that, it's going to advance onto the house, the body of the house. And once again, now a tip on the house. Some people think it's a perfect rectangle. It is not. It fits one way. Make sure it fits. Again, use that top-down view. There's a little angle to that house, so the top is a little wider than the bottom. If you don't get it on there right, you're not going to be happy with the placement of your blanket stitches. Take the time to look straight down on it. By the way, when we were doing hoop 1, I noticed afterwards that the snowbank wasn't lined up as good as it should have been. And the reason is I was working off an angle here and not doing what I keep telling you to do. I didn't look straight down. This is higher than I would like, this tabletop, and I was not getting a straight down view, and I paid the price for it. It was off a little bit. Doesn't need to be off. It can be right on. So make sure you're above your project, looking straight down when you place your applique pieces. You're going to be happier with your results. So then there goes the house, bada bing, bada boom. Then you're going to start to see placement lines for your window. The window goes on. The window pane is put in place. Then you're going to see your easel placement lines. Then the easel is stitched down. Then you're going to see the door come into play, and then the awning, and then the window, and then the sign on the easel. And that's hoop 2. So again, it's those first placement lines that you're going to use to pinpoint your design and make sure you get it right. And then after that, it's the same old story. Cut. Now we've gotten halfway through our project. We've gotten hoop 1, hoop 2, and now it's on to hoop 3. Yay! Hoop 3, we're actually going to put remember we put the trunk of our tree on way back in hoop 1. Now we're going to put our tree together, put the star on it. We're going to get this pretty large snowflake put in, and we're also going to do the second swirl of the snowman. How are we going to do it? The same old way. Hoop the sticky back stabilizer, and only the sticky back stabilizer. Stick it in your machine, and what will happen is you'll get your first set of placement lines. And here's what they're going to look like. You're going to see a little thing that represents the tree trunk. And then you're going to see the quadrants. Whoops, I went too far. There, that's it. So the first thing you're going to see is the tree trunk, and I'm telling you that's probably the most important placement line of all. That represents the piece of this fabric that needs to go underneath your tree. Don't ignore that, because I don't want your tree above your tree trunk. I want it over your tree trunk. So the placement line it's stitched represents the top of the tree trunk that was on your fabric. The other lines will just make sure you're straight over here and straight across the top. But that little tree trunk one right here, that's crucial, or your tree will be in 2 pieces instead of 1. After that, it's just going to do the same old thing. It's going to say, here's where I need you to stick a piece of the tree down. I'm going to stitch it down. Then another piece of the tree, and I'm going to stitch it down. Another piece of the tree, and it's building them one by one, putting the star on it, and then finishing off with a really pretty snowflake. And be picky with that snowflake. It's not as symmetrical as it appears, and flannel has some give and take to it. Take the time to really make sure you're happy with the placement before you iron that down. And that's it. Hooping 3's a breeze. Wahoo! We're on to hoop 4. Hasn't it been fun so far? And so rewarding. I just love watching my machine stitch this stuff out. Good old hoop 4. We're going to finally put the trim on our house, the roof on our house, the chimney. This is whipped cream, my friends. The straw, the small little snowflake over here, and the sign that was in your fabric embellishment kit. All of this is getting done in hoop 4, but it's a fast sew. Let's see what it's going to look like. Again, hoop your sticky back stabilizer and put only that under your sewing machine for placement lines number 1. Let's see what those placement lines are going to be this time. Oh yeah, these are important placement lines. Okay, see the first one that showed up on the bottom here, this little dark one? Guess what that represents? That represents the top of my red fabric, my house. That is critical. You don't want the roof of your house sitting up in the air, and you don't want it down over your awning. So you must pay attention to the top of that house. That is critical. After that, it's just showing you some lines to the corner to help keep everything straight. But the top of the house, that's really what I need to pay attention to. After that, I bet you guys know the drill. Placement stitch. Tack down, not tack down, stitch out. Trim is going down. I feel like I'm building a house. Woo. Then on goes my whipped cream. Then my straw. My snowflake. A lot of stitching on that snowflake. Then we have a chimney. And now we start to see the placement line for the fabric embellishment word latte. And then the sign on the roof that says Snowbucks Cafe. Congratulations. You have now completed Block 1 of Frosty Goes to Town. Can't wait to see your pictures.